very tired, and when I'm tired, I cry a lot. Also, when I'm not tired, so it might be a little rough.
It's gonna be fine.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Taffy. We love your book. I love your book. I won't speak for them because they might not have read it yet, but they will. Okay. I'm gonna posit something. So when I found out you were writing a novel, I had so many questions. I was like, oh my God, what is Taffy's novel going to be about? Is it going to be about, in what way is it going to be connected to the Taffy that I know and love? And when I found out it was about divorce, I was like, okay, so how does this connected? Like, how are fame and divorce connected? And I came up with an answer.
I would love to hear it. It sounds like you should answer this question.
Well, I'm going to answer it, and then I want you to tell me if I'm right or wrong, and just then smart things. So my thought is that they're both things that involve lots of self-doubt and anguish, and that divorce makes people famous at like school pickups. Like you have that scene right in the beginning where all of a sudden you're like a person who was always just a regular person, and then all of a sudden you're famous. Yeah. Okay, now you go.
I just found out someone just picked up my book from school and she told me she's getting a divorce. And now you all seem great, but I would love to just be on the phone with her right now and figuring out, like, what didn't I see? What didn't I know? You guys seemed like amazing at the orientation. And I don't know what it has to do with fame. This is what I think. I think that I wanted to write a novel, and that the idea was that the lateral move from what I do would be a novel in which there's a journalist and a famous person, and she's with the famous person. But I don't really think of what I do as interviewing famous people. What I do is I interview people, and the only people that get assigned to me are famous people. Because all you guys only care about famous people, which is fine with me. Because there's fun stuff about that. But the thing I wanted to do was, the way I made it manageable in my head to write a novel was that it would be the thing I normally do, which is write a profile of somebody that was just longer and not famous. Yeah. So that's what I did.
I mean, good start. Good start.
Thank you.
Okay. And so I listened to you on the Cut podcast.
Thank you.
It's good. You should listen to it. The Cut on Tuesdays. But so you describe pitching like a Taffy's mom. You describe pitching like a piece about divorce.
I did. What happened is that when I turned 40, everyone started coming to me and telling me they were getting divorced. I see some people in the audience not naming names. And I'm 43, and the last I was at their weddings, right, in like the early aughts, and the last time we were all dating, not together, but we were out dating, you had to show up in your disgusting human form and like look at people and have them look back at you, and try not to look too needy, but try not to look too aloof, and try to look like better than you look, and all of those things, and it was terrible. Yeah. I was never good at it because I always was like, hey, you love me. And now I was finding out from these people who, yes, it was very sad that their marriages ended, but then they would show me their phones, and they would show me how the dating is now. And the dating is now so different. You could be at home picking up a date. You could be at home having a date. Yeah. You could be doing, I mean, I'm a real multitasker, and the idea of watching TV and lining up dates appeals to me on a very primal level. And I could, and like for all of us who were so scared of showing up in person, it seemed like such a great solution. And it seemed so weird to me. And I called up my GQ editor and I said, I've discovered online dating. It's 2016. I've discovered apps. We have to do something. And he was very nice to me. And he said, most of our readers like don't even know the other thing. They don't even know that sometimes you would go somewhere. And so I got off the phone, I sat down, I pulled into a Le Pen quotidian, and I wrote the first 10 pages of this. I didn't pitch it elsewhere because I was embarrassed by the answer of this has been going on right in front of you. It was like the time I wanted to write about The Bachelor, because in its 16th season, I was on a JetBlue flight that only had that channel. And I was like, is this what everyone has been talking about? And I wrote about Chris Harrison for GQ. So that's how the novel came about, that it came about as this novel. And it came about, and first it was about dating. That's what it was about. Yeah. And then because it was people my age dating, it was really about marriage and these marriages they had just come from. And then it was really about divorce, which I didn't want to face for quite a while, and then did. Yeah. So, yeah, that's how it happened.
Okay, so I want to talk. So you're Taffy. You're the queen of the world, right? And you're very well known and very successful for.
I love that. Do it again.
Okay. So you're very well known and you're very successful.
Thank you.
At one kind of writing. But I think it's going okay, Taffy. So I think it's gonna be all right.
Okay.
But then you pull into this LPQ.
Yeah. I didn't know we could nickname it.
I know. You know what? A friend of mine said that to me once.
I would love to have known that because I think I'm mispronouncing it.
No, a friend of mine said that to me once, and I said to Mike, I was like, "Oh, Olivia told me about there's really cool new coffee shop called LPQ," and he was like, "Le Pen Quotidien."
Or you just give the address and you show up and you're like, "But this is Le Pen Quotidien." Okay.
Anyway, so you pull into the LPQ.
Yes, and I sit down and I start writing.
And you sit down and. Is this like someone who has never spoken French, like landing in Paris and is like, bonjour, je m'appelle Taffy? Like,
I've read novels.
Okay, but had you written fiction before?
I had attempted some fiction. I had some early efforts with a different, before I had the agent I have now, I had some early efforts and was constantly being told that my characters were unlikable. And it was only when I wrote this and handed it over and was told that I was like, oh, we're in that conversation that I thought I was immune to because I write for men's magazines, that this is like, we're in the likable character conversation. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Thank you for your time. Right. And I left that agent. Yeah.
I've had 5.
Really? How long have you been with
Don't
the
tell
current
anybody.
One? Oh.
A long time, and I love her, and I'm very happy. Okay. But like sometimes it's like a marriage.
You got to know when to hold them. Got to know when to fold them. So I wrote the first 10 pages, and then I wrote the last 10 pages, and then that's how I write my profiles. And then I did it, and then I did everything else in between. I know that sounds.
Wait, Taffy, I have so many follow-up questions.
Okay.
Okay, hold on. Just walk me through this. Okay, so you write the first 10 pages. I can wrap my
head around that.
Like dinosaur-sized brain around that.
It's a beautiful brain.
But what I cannot wrap my head around
is the ending.
No, I love the ending.
Yeah.
Is it the same end? Like
it's exactly the same, except for one detail, which is when it went from third person to first person after the first draft. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I think endings are beautiful, and if you could just like try to get to a good one, if you can write this beautiful ending and then try to earn it, it's a really interesting way to write.
But did you know? Does that mean that when you started? Okay, so we're at the LPQ. So you've written the first, and you write these first 10 pages. And then after that point, did you have to sit and think, and in your head, is it like did you suddenly see like a 3-dimensional road map with all these characters and everything, and like, or did you see like a fuzzy shape, like a lump of clothing on a chair in the dark, and then the ending? Tell me.
I saw the whole thing. But I don't say that in a braggy way. Like, I saw the whole thing, and it's changed since then. Right. But I saw a very clear vision of the kind of book I wanted to write. Yeah. And I had a lot of experience with that kind of book, like the book about a malcontent man. Yeah. Like, that's what I was raised on. Yeah. Right. That's what we were all raised on.
Yeah. So what was it about that kind of book, though, that you thought, like, that's it. That's the kind of book I want to write? I
wrote for GQ for a very long time, and I wrote for other places. But when I wrote for GQ, people would go bonkers for the story. And the conclusion I came to was that women are interested in women's stories, but everyone is interested in men's stories. And as disheartening as that is, I got a mortgage. So I would write stories about men, but then also it was much easier to write about men for me because I didn't bring all of my issues to them. Yeah. And I felt like I was good at it. Yeah. So I was writing about, and also the greatest thing about writing about men was that when you would write about women at a certain time, I think actually things have changed in like the last couple of years, but like really since this book was sold, like I've watched this book lose a little bit of, like, I've been worried for its relevance in the last 2 years, which is all good for humanity, maybe bad for sales. But what was so interesting to me is that all the stories that I would tell about women were always about their struggle to be the kind of person who got a story written about them, like the obstacles they overcame. And they all had to have a kind of personality that could surmount those obstacles. Whereas the men were just allowed to do what they wanted to do. And it was amazing. And so when they would talk to me, they wouldn't necessarily talk to me about how they got the project done. They would talk to me about their artistic yearning and their souls. And that was a very interesting conversation to me. Whereas you couldn't even, I mean, maybe it was a fault in how I did things, but the women that I interviewed were like, the thing that they wanted to talk about was how hard it was to get this done. They wanted to be the change they wanted to see in the world. So they were talking about that. But when I spoke to men, I heard something in their stories about, you know, like the loneliness of existence or whatever it is, you know. Yeah. You know how men talk. But I had these really intense, great, wonderful conversations with them. And so I was good at that. And then I wrote about this other man, and I had a choice. I had equal amounts of women coming to me and telling me that things were over. And I would listen to their stories and the things that were going on with them for the apps. I mean, my friend, I won't say her name, but she, even though this does not implicate her at all, she came to my house one day to change into an outfit to go out on a date. And I said, let me see his profile. And his profile was this guy who's like, whatever. But then his come hither, like, what is it called? It's called your, what? His bio. Is that what it's called? Yeah. It's called like your case for yourself, your marketing plan, your marketing document. It's time, Emma.
Oh my God, we're taking off our jackets.
We decided to take off our jackets at the same time.
I told Taffy if she wanted to disrobe, I would disrobe together.
What was I saying? Okay, and his marketing document. His marketing plan said, listen, I have been with enough manipulative women my whole life. And And if you are into playing games and you are into, like, I won't even say it, my nephew's in the room, I won't even use the language, but they would say things like, if you're into mind games, please don't even bother contacting me. And I was like, why are you going out with him? Like, what about this? What about this was like, we might have a good time. Like, if you can't even write your document, you can't even pretend on your document, then, I remember I was in the right when I met Claude over there, I was in like JDate 1.0, pretending I was 40 pounds lighter than I am, with the handle Matza Bride. And still nobody was like, I was like, I love to go to the movies. And nobody was interested. This is a lot, I know. Did I answer the question?
Who knows what the question was? I'm going to say yes.
Thank you. Thank you for that great question. I just came from the Miss New Jersey pageant. I'm not kidding. That's where I was this weekend. No, I wasn't competing. And they have this amazing way of answering questions. I'm on a story. Don't repeat it. Who's recording? Don't tweet that. But they're like, they ask me a simple question like, what time is it?
What time is it, Miss New Jersey?
It's almost 8. And then you walk off, and it was amazing. And I was like, that's a skill to be able to answer, look people in the eye, and then walk off. I can't do that. Next question.
Okay, here's my next question. So as someone who had written a little bit of fiction, but not a lot of fiction?
I had a degree in screenwriting.
Oh, okay.
I had a degree in screenwriting,
okay.
But I wasn't very good at it.
How did you know that you weren't good at it? Did your professors say,
professionals
Taffy,
in
you get
the
a
industry
C+?
Would say things like, this is kind of good, but not really. They would say honest things to me like that.
Did you want to be a screenwriter? Is that
that's what I went to school for it. Did you get a degree in something you weren't that interested? Like, I wanted to do it. What did you have a degree in? Do you have a degree?
Owning a bookstore. I was an English major.
Okay. I wanted to be a screenwriter, but I went to school in the 90s, and I was taught this very kind of cynical version of screenwriting where it's like, there's this protagonist, and he has 6 flaws, and by page 10, you've hinted at all of them, and by page 30, he meets his girlfriend, and if he's not likable, you give him a dog or clubfoot. I'm not kidding. I'm giving you my NYU education right now. If he's too likable, you have him kick a dog. Right? Can you believe that? The 90s. So I knew, like, I would try to write those things, and they weren't very good. And then I got a job in journalism, and then I got another job in journalism, and then I became the person that you knew before this book. Yeah. And I had all of this experience with telling these true stories. I had all of this experience with people being okay with the fact that the truth is very messy and that people contradict themselves, which wasn't a thing you were allowed to. You were not allowed to have a protagonist who contradicted himself. Like, go watch Con Air. I assure you, we were forced to watch Con Air 72 times and like see how he's consistent throughout. And that's just not the truth. There are people, like everyone I interview is a little bit of something and a little bit of something in opposition to that. Mm-hmm. And so once I did that for a lot of years, and I understood that the audience is extremely smart, and what they want is not really entertainment. What they want is to see, oh my God, someone from, can you confirm that this is true? We went to film school together. It's all true. And it's true. And I, in the end, found out that people, like, what people want is to feel less lonely. What people want is to recognize themselves. What people want is a real, genuine struggle. And I only found out about that when people were generous enough with me to tell me the truth about their struggles. And then I could write a real story.
Right.
And that's why when I returned to fiction all those years later, I produced something that got published.
Yeah. Well, and so I mean, what I was not at all surprised to see when I opened your book is that like it has all of that. Like that is why people love you. Is that like whoever you're profiling or whatever you're writing about is like you the truth is like pulsing in the middle of it.
It's really nice. Thank you.
It's true. It's true. And I was like, oh my God, that's just what her novel is going to be like. And it is. But I was wondering if you could sort of, okay, so back up, not quite as far as film school, but like my question is like, is there like a pinpoint, like, is there a moment you can pinpoint when you feel like when that clicked, when you like found your voice? Was there like a piece that you were writing or like a period of time in your career where you like sort of, you know, I don't know, just like clicked into
Yes.
into your gear?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
So there was this, I was first writing personal essays and those were doing very well. And then I was doing celebrity profiles and those started doing pretty okay. Yeah. And I did a story about Damon Lindelof. No, not yet. Not yet. I did a story about Gabby Hoffman. Does everyone remember Gabby Hoffman? Yeah. Thank you. Remember Gabby Hoffman. And in it, she had just returned to New York after years of living in Hudson and trying to decide if she ever would have been an actor in the first place, if her mother hadn't like shoved her into the business to help support them. And she could not figure this out. And then finally one day she took an audition call and she came back. And she was in New York, living in New York. And she had grown up in the Chelsea Hotel. Like she was living in New York for the first time in a long time. And I had been living in Los Angeles. And I was born here as well. I was born in New York and I grew up mostly in Brooklyn. And I was back in New York also for the first time. And it had when I had left, it had started changing so incrementally that when she found it to be unrecognizable, I suddenly saw that it was unrecognizable. And I saw that there were a lot of things that she was telling me, but that a story could only be about one thing, and why not make it the thing that I see very clearly through her. Her frustration that that this is what Times Square is like now, that there are no artists living in Manhattan anymore, that you know, I remember on that trip, I was so baffled because you could now pay for a bus ride, not on the bus. You know, those little things on the side where you have to, I still don't understand it. If I find I'm in front of one of those, I take a cab. and I remember going to meet her in a part of Brooklyn that's actually this part of Brooklyn. And I was like, when I was growing up, you could not walk through here. Like if you were walking through this area, you were in trouble. Like you were lost, you were in trouble. Like all of Brooklyn was like that. Bushwick. I was watching on Girls how people were living in Bushwick. Bushwick was where you could reliably see a car set on fire on a Saturday night when I was growing up. How old do I sound? 1,000,000 years old. I know.
No, me too.
I know. And I went to NYU and my parents went to NYU and they would come to NYU and they'd say, this used to be the thing. And I'd be like, oh, you're so boring. And now I'm so boring. But I walked by the Palladium and it was an NYU dorm called the Palladium. And I was like, this is my story. Yeah. And I could be here with her on it. And I could extrapolate from her the thing that she's not very good at saying, which is that you can't go home again. Yeah. But we both have that thing. And actually, very luckily, the day I was supposed to go back, a snowstorm hit. And I was forced to stay 4 extra days. And I did. And I was just like walking around in it. And this is not this anymore. And now this is a sushi place. And now this is a sushi place. And everything's a sushi place. When I was growing up, there was no such thing as sushi. and that's I feel like when I came online. And the reaction to that was so big that I felt like I had finally found a voice in which I can meld a personal essay with a profile.
And did your editors understand that too? Like when you turned it in, were they like, whoa, we have a live wire?
No, they did not talk like they were in a 40s musical. But to their credit, they were using email at the time. But they were excited about it. They were really like the editor, Adam Sternberg. He was the editor of that piece, and he assigned me my first profile. And this was my second profile. Wow. This was my second profile, and it was here that I just like understood what I was supposed to be doing. Mm-hmm. And he was so excited about it, and that's like being able to piggyback onto his confidence. Mm-hmm. Later, there were a lot of people. There were a lot of people. There were a lot of people who would later say that they wanted me to write them a story, and then I would hand it in, and they'd say, "Oh no, not this." But I'd know that the thing I did was good, mm-hmm. and I knew not to work with them again, mm-hmm. which is a crazy thing to be thinking in this time of really dwindling magazines and editors who are stretched very thin. But I found that it was still there for me, that like if you worked hard, if you were always on time, if you were so enthusiastic, if you loved being edited, if you were unwilling to stop until it was perfect, that would ignite an excitement in your editor as well. Your editor who's always very tired.
Okay, so I want to talk about editors because in my imagination, well, clearly it's like 1940 in my...
Yeah, say, I got an assignment.
So in that imagination where you're wearing like a jaunty hat and like have a little pad, yeah. In my imagination, journalists work with their editors on like just on a much more like rapid and ongoing basis than novelists do. And I was wondering just sort of what your experience was like with your editor on the novel, and if you sort of came to it like thinking like, here, look, like, wanting sort of like a more immediate back and forth.
I did. And I went with the editor I wanted was a former GQ editor who is now at Random House. Yeah. And I said, that's what I want. I want the treatment. Like I want this, I don't want to be treated as an artist. That's what I found out, that they're so willing to say, people are willing to say, once you just decide that you're a novelist, people are like, oh, well, you have to decide if this works. And are you sure you want to do this? And that I did not want that. I wanted someone to say, this makes no sense. Please make it better by doing perhaps this and this. And he did. He was really wonderful. I said, like, pretend this is a GQ story, and edit it that way. And I think probably there are a lot of people who are not, I've interviewed novelists and some of them don't read their reviews. Do you read your, of course do you want me to recite all my reviews right now? Okay. Like, how could you not be interested or engaged with what people thought of your work? How many people are reading it? My editor he sent me champagne after I got this very good review, and he said, you are a joy to work with even if you ask about pre-orders a lot. And I was like, who isn't asking about pre-orders? I would, if someone could install like a Bloomberg terminal where I could watch the pre-orders come in, I would get rid of my Roku.
Taffy, listen, like some of us are so crazy about seeing the other side of things that we open a bookstore. You know what I mean?
I know. It's like, look.
I completely understand. Like I have a lot of novelist friends who are like the hide in the woods type of person,
Right.
who like don't read reviews and don't like the Twitter and like
Yeah.
don't want to know anything. And to me, I'm like, but that's part of your job. Like
I know.
this is all
That's
part of the
thing.
job.
It's like, why is this? Hello. Why is this? I have sisters who keep walking. I have so many sisters that they keep walking in. Why is it that, like, why are we allowed to be precious about this? Why,
Yeah.
like, and I don't begrudge anyone anything,
Yeah.
but why aren't we held to the rigors of this is what's best, and sometimes the truth hurts? And
Right.
like, wouldn't everyone reading their, wouldn't it be interesting to hear how other people reacted to your material?
yeah.
I guess not is the answer.
Well, and that, like, I mean, I will say I do draw the line. Like, I do not read civilian reviews.
Goodreads gay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't. But professional reviews, like, I do, because even if they're not, you know, totally glowing and positive, like, I'm interested in hearing that too.
Me too. I read the Goodreads.
Oh, no, Taffy.
I'm doing my own haunted stare.
No, you don't. Okay, ignore those. So I'm going to give you a
I
talking
worked
to
at a
later.
soap opera magazine.
Yeah,
This was
oh,
the haunted
wait,
sca-
oh,
This is the
man.
haunted stare.
Oh God, I want to talk about soap operas too, but I also like want to give everyone time to ask questions. Okay, I'm just gonna try to like see. Okay, I want to ask you just like a couple of. Do you think Gwyneth Paltrow has a sense of humor?
She is so funny and she is so cool. That's the thing. That's the problem.
Okay, okay. That was just
It's
a question
lightning
while
round.
I was
It's a
looking.
lightning round. I
yeah,
can feel
yeah,
it.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm not going to elaborate.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Does Bradley Cooper? No. Okay. Okay. So you've written so much about people who are famous. And so how does it feel? Like, I feel like there have been now like a solid half dozen profiles of Taffy,
There are a lot of
profiling the
profiles.
profiler.
Everyone's very excited to profile the
yeah,
profiler.
profiling profiler.
And
So-
I can imagine that for their readership, only 14 people understand. They're like, whoa, who is she? Oh, is she the one whose name is in 4-point type at the bottom of some things I sometimes read? Like, I don't understand how, like, you know, they say we're too insular sometimes.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But you didn't answer my question. How does it feel?
It feels horrible. I feel very powerless, and I understand every moment in everyone I have ever interviewed where they try to extend friendship, but I'm not doing that. I'm instead trying to control the situation, which they know not to. Like, they have been media trained and know not to they know not to talk when they don't want to be quoted on something, and I don't know that. So I say things like, is that really the question you wanted to ask? Or how did the thing I just say not trigger the question about the next thing you should be asking? And sometimes I will even say, if I were you, that would be my kicker.
Yeah.
And what I'll say about the press I've gotten is that it has been very generous in light of that behavior. That, like, nobody was mean to me about that, except my favorite one, the Cosmo one, was a little mean to me about it. And I was
that
like,
one.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, I deserve it. Like, to love someone and to burn them at the same time it's the work. That's the work. So that you leave and you're like, did she like me or didn't she? I don't know.
She did. Okay, let's see who else likes you, Taffy. Who has a question for Taffy? I have 100 more questions, literally, so I'm going to give everyone, okay, person in that baseball hat. Yes, hi.
I'm wondering to what extent you had to kind of shift your thinking around writing, moving from a journalistic frame of mind where you're bound to facts and a specific set of source material to a process where you had none of that, where it's just your thoughts and your stories and unlimited as to what the story would take.
The unlimited is the problem. I first loved it. I loved the fact that I wasn't going to have to deal with a fact checker. I love the fact that I wasn't going to have to like get the call during fact checking where someone tells me like how horrible, they knew I was horrible the whole time, only to later be like, oh, that wasn't so bad, thank you. I get that a lot, and I was really looking forward to these people not being real, which was amazing for me. The only problem with it is that it tasks your imagination so that if the thing you're good at doing is observing people, there's no one to observe. You have to not just build the person, but build their reaction. Mm-hmm. And that's impossible. And the thing I had to do in revisions was keep working on that to make my characters real people, because are they people, like, do they speak in a high-pitched voice? Like, what are the quirks of the people? I'll tell you that a few years ago, when I turned 40, my mother gave me a mirror to put on my desk in hopes that I would start wearing makeup. Sorry, Mom. It's like, she tried. And this, I did not do this. And I don't use it for that, to her chagrin. Instead, I use it to make an expression and then to describe it on paper. I'm like, oh, surprise. What happens when, like, what happens when you're surprised? What happens when you're angry? You know, what happens when you're thinking? Literally, if you can catch yourself being bored, what happens to your face? Like, my jaw kind of goes to the left and my eyes get bigger. And that's what I use the mirror for. So it was very hard. It was the hardest part for me. That was a good question. Thank you. That was a good question. Why are you all here? I'm terrible.
In the stripes.
Yeah, I was wondering, how do you sort of push through, not that you're getting rejected now, but in your sort of past career, like I read something, I can't remember where now, about you went and interviewed for a job at Condé Nast.
Oh, yeah.
And you got a particularly harsh rejection, but then you sort of pulled yourself together and you emailed someone at GQ and ended up talking to them. Then tonight you're talking about sort of turning in pieces and people sort of not understanding and, you know, you not wanting to work with them again. I guess, how do you sort of push through that rejection to know that what you're doing is good and right? And
I always thought that the real work of freelancing, because that's not a writing question, it's a freelancing question, is how do you behave in light of a rejection? And if your answer to when I speak to editors, they are so baffled by the fact that sometimes they turn a pitch down, but they never hear from the writer again. And they wonder what exactly they did to make it so that the writer was scared off. Sometimes they even say at the bottom of the email, like, who here has gotten that email? But I'd love to hear any other ideas you have. And you're like, oh, that must be a lie. I'm never going to contact that person again because they hate me. I think that the thing I was always good at is being more concerned with my ability to stay in this business. By the time I started, I had children and I didn't want to go back to an office. I was more concerned with that than with the feelings surrounding rejection. So when people would say no, I wish I had an editor. I mean, I have one back there, Justin. But like when I was like, hey, why don't we do, you know, whatever athlete I had heard of? Like, hey, Magic Johnson. Like, what's and he'd be like, no, we can't do that. And I'd be, well, how about this one? Well, why not? And like, I found that I'll tell you this. This is the statistic I love to tell everybody. There is no story you ever read of mine that didn't get a no before it got a yes, before I started at the Times. And that was only 2 years ago. Every other story, people said no. And I had to keep going back and saying, like, I have this, like, oh, no, like, my position was like, if you said no, I obviously didn't explain myself well enough. And I think that sometimes that's the thing that pushes through, that like, oh my gosh, you're so enthusiastic about this. Maybe it's not a terrible idea. And it doesn't cost that much to let you try, right? Like, no one's paid, despite what you've heard on Twitter, nobody is paid that much at all. Like, controversies about word rates, and we're all talking about like very little money, and it makes me very sad that we are that like the little amount of money is the big amount of money. But anyway, so once you're good at that, once you're someone with ideas, once you're someone who is enthusiastic about her ideas, I think that people want to keep working with you, and then you just stay in their face. And these people, they didn't want to be my friend, but like they could look forward to an email from me several times a week.
I love you, Taffy. Yes.
So you talked a little bit about how frequently the profiles would veer into personal essays.
Yeah.
And I think a lot about the Hillsong piece and how that really towards the end shifts into a very personal space. And so looking at that through the lens of often getting rejections and things like that. At what point do you know what the personal angle that's going to take is? Do you know that when you're pitching it? Does that come through?
No. When I said personal essay before, by the way, I don't mean my own personal essay. I mean their personal essay, meaning the same things that I would describe on my own behalf. Exactly at the junction where we meet, I could then describe their feelings. Why? Because most people are exactly the same, which is why we all like the same movies and we all like the same music and we all like the same books, because we're all exactly the same. And emotional notes, for the most part, hit us in the right way. And everyone's like, well, I was listening to Wilco before Wilco was a thing. Like, you too are part of that thing. I know I used Wilco. I don't even know of a band alternative enough for that example to make sense. That's how basic I am. I'm very basic. So imagine I said a band that was subversive or like a little punk. Thank you. With Hillsong, I was like, I remember saying to them when they assigned it to me, I said, this is a Christian church. And they said, we know. And I said, well, I'm Jewish. And they said, we know. And I said, do you know how Christians, like, I don't know, how evangelical Christians feel about, I don't know how they feel about Jews, like if they want me hanging around in their church. And they loved it. They were like, I mean, I still get a text every now and again from that guy who's like, where are you at? Where are you at? And I always give him my location. I'm in Montclair, but I'm thinking of going to South Orange later. I did not realize like how badly everyone should be converted. But the minute I started having feelings about it, I named those feelings. I feel like religion, there's nobody, even if you weren't raised with any religion, there's so much religion around us that there's no way to completely divorce yourself from the idea that your reaction might mirror a lot of people's reaction. It did not surprise me that people like me liked that story, but people in churches were reading it for their sermons. I still don't really understand that, but I think that there's something about the fact that when you are genuine, and that's the thing you have to just always be, is genuine, and be able to notice what you're noticing. If you notice the sadness, you notice you keep going back to the church even after your reporting is done, something's going on there and you owe it to your reader.
Clancy. I'm going to repeat whatever you say because you're far away. No, you. Yeah, Clancy.
I wanted to know, how did you balance your writing for the Times and writing this novel? How long did it take, and what was your writing process like?
So here, repeat her questions.
How did I balance writing for the Times and writing this novel? I sold, and what was my writing process like? I sold this novel 2 years ago this week, and I also accepted the New York Times offer 2 years ago this week. So what I was balancing was freelancing. I was not balancing writing for the Times. And the way I did that was that I was still writing so many stories that I didn't want to be writing. And I was so resentful of it that when I started doing this, I would do it very defiantly. And I didn't have like a schedule about it. I had this Word document that stayed open on my computer for 6 months, and sometimes it would get a sentence, and sometimes it would get a paragraph, and sometimes it would get a page, and sometimes it would get 10 pages. And then one day, I realized I was close to being done with it, and I started taking weekends to just like power through. But the answer is there's no process, and the answer is there's no balance. Because if I were to think about things like that, my head would explode. I just really wanted to finish it. I really wanted to do it. I had like a fire in me for the story, and it was exciting to me. And I didn't want to keep writing. I was being sent on these profiles. There was, this, it was a known thing about me that I would always deliver, right? Like I would always be on time. And it was another known thing about me that the stories I would reject year round, in April I would say yes to them because that's when camp tuition comes due. And I'm like, oh, camp still costs this much money? And I was being sent on these stories. That were like women's magazine cover stories where I was being, right before the revolution where we didn't say lose weight anymore, right before the revolution where we didn't say be strong and powerful, we said lose 2 sizes, you pig. Right before that, I was sent to ask women what their least favorite part of their body was. And I would sit there, like it was always over lunch, which is like a trap. And I would sit there like eating, knowing that like I wasn't gonna, like this was being paid for and I wasn't gonna have to write about what I ate. And I'd be like, and they would be afraid of eating, or they would be like, are you gonna put down what I eat? And then they'd order a cheeseburger and they didn't even know how to eat the cheeseburger because they'd never seen a cheeseburger. And I just didn't want to do that anymore. Like I just needed to get out, you know? And I think it's probably a silly thing to be like, I'm gonna write this novel so I could make money. But I've never been great with decisions like that. So that's how it is. Did I answer the question? Yeah. Okay, good.
Maybe 1 or 2 more. Yes.
What do you do when you are profiling someone and they have a lot of accomplishments, but like they are boring?
Oh, this is such a specific question. Yes. What do you do when you interview someone who has a lot of accomplishments, but they are boring? I'll tell you this. First, I'll say no one is boring. I will. I'll say that there's no such thing as a boring person. There's somebody who doesn't want to share with you, which is very different. But it's not their job to be good at sharing with you. It's not their good job. It's not their job to even be good at speaking about themselves. It's their job to just show up. And it's your story. It's your job to write a good story. And I mean, I like the story that got me the GQ contract was like I went to interview Nicki Minaj and she fell asleep. Like she didn't say anything. Like I had no quotes. And I feel like in those moments, the worst thing my worst stories are people who are articulate. Like my worst stories are people who are amazing at talking about themselves, because then you have to let them talk about themselves. But if not, you have this space where you can do an amazing thing, because the reason they became somebody that you would write about is because they are good at something. And being good at something is really interesting. So if you stop thinking that way, and think like I could write about anybody, there you go. That's what I think.
All right, last one, front row.
Oh yeah, this is sort of in the phylum of moving from profiling to fiction. Like the good profiles you read reveal a truth about something, about a person you thought you knew. How did it feel to construct your own truth about a person and different people? Shorter version, did you develop like a God complex when you were It's not an accusation. I'm just curious.
No, I know. Everyone's treating it like it's an accusation.
No. It's really
Nice.
not. I'm just curious about like to play in that different sandbox.
It was, like I said, it was very, very hard for me to do it. And the worst part of it was that I was not constrained by the truth. So no, I had no God complex. I was just very scared that these people didn't feel real enough, or that they weren't complex enough, or that the thing that people love about a profile, which is people contradicting themselves, couldn't be there because I was making it up. That said, go back to what I said before, which is everyone's the same. And if you give somebody an initial set of characteristics, they will always react the same. Do you have parents? Do you know what they're going to say no matter what you say? Me too. Do you have any relationship you have is predictable. It's like chaos theory, right? It's like eventually it's a pattern. And our best relationships are the ones where we don't yet realize the pattern, right? Which is why. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Taffy. Okay, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to whisk Taffy into the back, where I'm going to park her like a queen on a throne. And here's what you're going to do. You're going to purchase a copy of Fleischman's in Trouble, or several, that's fine. And then you're going to line up and have her sign them and, I don't know, kiss a ring. It's going to be great.
Some of you will leave now, which is natural. I just want to say that it's very special to be here with you, an author I admire so much. And this is my launch day. This is the first day, and it's so special for me to be here with all of you. And I thank you so much for coming. This means the world to me.
Yeah.